What we're going to do is walk through a case study for business-to-business website content. And the example I'm going to use is Shopify Plus. And what we're going to do is take a look at the various types of content, how they've structured the content, and I'm going to use a number of frameworks so that we can look at what Shopify Plus is doing, and then you can generalize it to your specific situation. So one of the frameworks I'm going to use is the structure that the top management consultancy McKinsey uses to prove their point, to make arguments in presentations, and we'll talk about how they do that. Another framework we're going to use is the Reduce framework, which is a psychological framework from the Wharton School, and we're just going to walk through the various components and how the content all comes together in a coherent way. Before I start analyzing and breaking apart how this website comes together, I just want to show you briefly what the website looks like. So this is the Shopify Plus website. It's not Shopify in general. It's a sub-brand of Shopify Plus, and we'll take a look later on about why it's different from Shopify generally. Here it is, lots of black and green branding. We have legacy enterprise software is broken. The world of e-commerce is changing. So the website is structured around these horizontal sections where it goes black, white, gray, and then back to black again. So there's a very clear differentiation between what the sections are, very bold contrasts. And then we have these 4 sections at the top. We have 3 sections on the upper right. And at the bottom, we can see various components of the website. So very well structured website, nothing completely surprising here. But let's deep dive to kind of see what's happening there. What is the strategic thinking that's behind how the content comes together? So when people are analyzing websites, they try to guess at what the strategy is by looking at what the messaging is on the homepage, what are the different sections, the different industries that are part of the navigation. But a lot of this can be outdated because people don't necessarily update their website as frequently as they do things like emails or just communications with customers. And the key to actually finding out what the company strategy is to go to the investor relations section. And you can only do that with publicly listed companies. And often what you find in the investor relations section is presentations. And presentations are a nice way of summarizing what the company strategy is, what the direction is, and then you can see what they're actually prioritizing. And it becomes much more apparent why they've structured things the way they have. So if we look at the investor relations presentation, and I've grabbed the screenshot here, we can see that Shopify at large basically has 3 target groups of customers they're going after. The first is entrepreneurs, which are basically micro businesses, and then they have SMB, small medium businesses. So they've made a separation between kind of tiny companies, which are often just one person, SMBs, which would be probably any company that has an employee, and then larger brands. So we see here that Shopify Plus is catering to larger brands. So it's a completely separate brand from Shopify. Shopify caters to these 2 groups, and Shopify Plus caters to large brands. And the monthly price is significantly higher, almost 10 times higher than this plan. So we're looking at $2,000 per month instead of, say, $100, $200 a month. Now, we can get more granular details by looking at the investor relations sections as well to see what they're actually focusing on in terms of marketing. We can see that there are different media or different channels that are prioritized depending on which type of customers they're trying to acquire. So for entrepreneurs, they're focusing on word of mouth. Now, why are they doing that? Because it's they need a very cost-effective way to acquire entrepreneurs because the lifetime value of any given entrepreneur is very low. The reason it's low is because the price point's low. It's also because the churn rate is high. Entrepreneurs often go out of business quickly. So in order to justify acquisition, you need a really cheap acquisition technique. And word of mouth is one of the single most efficient. It has very strong economies of scale. So that's what they're focusing on. The Shopify Studios, search engine marketing, digital advertising, Shopify blog. Now, this is where they're starting to get the small businesses that are larger than just solopreneurs, etc. So they're focusing a lot here on content marketing. So getting things out there, a lot of useful information. They also have Shopify support, Shopify POS sales. Now, when we're truly getting into business to business for larger companies, for like $2,000 a month price point, there's a significant shift in what channels are being used. So now we're talking global events. So going to these places to get face-to-face recognition with high-profile people in large companies, partners and affiliates. I've highlighted time and time again in my courses the importance of partnership marketing. And you can see that that's the priority for them with getting access, getting trust among large brands. And then we have Shopify Plus sales. So the more business to business you go, the more enterprise you go, the more you can afford to have a salesperson's time dedicated to acquiring customers. So these are things like cold email outreach, building face-to-face relationships, building email relationships, live chat. You can afford to invest in those expensive customer acquisition tactics because the lifetime value of a given large brand is going to be far, far higher than an entrepreneur. Okay, so there's another key insight that's happening here. So as we analyze the Shopify Plus website, it's within this context. The website is not necessarily the main acquisition channel. And it's also not necessarily the main top of funnel early access exposure that the brand has. So the website in many cases is actually going to be a middle of funnel marketing communications. So people may hear about Shopify Plus through sales outreach. So things like a cold email. A cold email might educate somebody about Shopify Plus, and then what's going to happen from the cold email is the person might go to the website. So they haven't heard about Shopify Plus necessarily through search engine marketing, because that was the focus here with these micro businesses, but they're going to hear about it from the cold email and then visit the website. So the trigger might be a salesperson talking to somebody at an event, or a cold email, possibly even a cold call, something like that. And then the website's function, the function of the content, is not necessarily that top of funnel stuff. It's also not necessarily the bottom of funnel stuff, because again, because there's so much emphasis on the sales team, a lot of that direct response, let's get people into a sales conversation, is going to happen perhaps offline, not necessarily through the website itself. So it changes the way we think about websites when we get more into the business-to-business space. It is a component of a larger business-to-business content system.